Campfire is a 7-inch diameter overall, 9.25 inches tall, and 2.2 pounds. So in order to get this stove going a little bit faster, I'm going to show you a trick that I use, which is to put a little bit of citronella camp fuel on the stick and then put it in the stove. And you want to make sure that you put the citronella on the stick and not pour directly into the stove. So another benefit of using the citronella is the smoke that comes off of it, it'll help keep the bugs away. Now we're going to get the Ranger started. So the Ranger specs are 15 inches diameter, 12.5 inches tall, and 15 pounds. There's a pretty big difference in the size and the weight between the Campfire and the Ranger. The Ranger is the smallest fire pit stove. It's so big, which is why they don't classify it as a camp stove. So even when I go boat camping, I take the Ranger along with me because it helps conserve wood and it allows me to have a nice clean fire pit at the end. A lot of campsite fire pits end up getting messy from abuse and misuse. So that's why I bring my own stove along, and the Ranger is perfect for that. So one thing I like to do on my Ranger when I'm camping is cook some really nice juicy steaks. So I have this grill grate that I just put on top, and that's what I use to cook on. So using the grill grate, you can also put your camp pots and frying pans on top. So if you didn't want to cook steaks all the time, and if you wanted to cook some scrambled eggs or something else, you can use a cast iron pan or even a standard camp pan, and that'll allow you to cook a variety of different foods without having to bring another stove. And one trick that we've learned is that when you want to cook good steaks and you want the heat to be nice and even, you can actually use charcoal inside of this stove. So you can get the charcoal going and cook a nice even steak. My favorite pan to use when cooking on these solo stoves is this cast iron fajita pan. It's the perfect size for an average size steak, and it makes sure that the steak is cooked nice and evenly without becoming charred if you were to cook on the open flame. So on my fajita pan, I do have a silicone cover for the handle because it does get really hot. But one thing that I noticed is because the solo stoves get so hot, just that silicone handle wasn't enough for me to be able to grab it. So I actually stuffed the silicone cover with high temp RTV, and that really helps absorb all the heat so you can really pick it up and you don't have to worry about the handle being too hot. So with the Ranger being a little bit bigger, I'm going to use slightly larger sticks than I did with the Campfire to get it started. And as usual, I'm going to use my homemade fire starters to get this rolling. These fire starters are just made from cotton pads and a little bit of mineral oil. So next up we have the Bonfire. Solo Stove has a lot of accessories available for this stove, including the spark arrestor. My spark arrestor is brand new, I haven't used it yet, and thus the zip ties are still on it. So the Bonfire was our first camping stove from Solo Stove. So we've used it a lot and have a lot of experience with cooking on it. We actually even made our own custom simmer ring, so that way we could cook some other type of foods and still be able to let the air and flame come up through the top. And we use the standard grill grate for cooking. So the Bonfire is definitely great when you have a couple additional people with you, so you can fit a lot of different foods and a really large skillet on it. So the Bonfire is 19.5 inches in diameter, 14 inches tall, and 20 pounds. So there's not a huge weight difference between the Ranger and the Bonfire. So as you go up in size in the solo stoves, you can use larger and larger pieces of wood. One thing that we noticed is between the Ranger and the Bonfire, the Ranger seems a lot more efficient when it comes to burning wood and conserving wood. So we use a lot less wood in the Ranger than we do in the Bonfire. So starting off, some of these stoves are a little bit smoky, and part of that is because of my wood choice. I'm using larger wood than what you would typically use as tinder to get them started, and two, I added that citronella oil, which I'm really using to keep the bugs away. After these get started, that smoke will die down a lot, and you'll see the wood gasifying action happening. So whenever you cook on stoves, you want to make sure you're not using any oils like the citronella oil or the pallet wood, because it does have toxins in it that you don't want getting into your food. So if you do plan to cook, make sure you use regular sticks from the forest and not pallet wood. So now for the brand new Yukon. So it has a 30-inch diameter, it's 16 inches tall and 45 pounds. So the Yukon's definitely really heavy, and it's definitely meant as a backyard fire pit. It's pretty bulky and heavy to try and take anywhere. Out of all of the stoves, we like the Ranger the best as far as wood consumption and portability. So this is our first burn in the Yukon, so I'm going to try adding some of these standard size firewood pieces to the outside, which hopefully that'll allow them to dry out and burn really well. So you obviously don't need to use the citronella to get these going. I'm just trying to get the stoves to run a little bit faster so the video doesn't take forever. So the wind's picked up quite a bit, but you can see that this homemade fire starter works really well. You can see the wind pushing the flame off to the right, and it's still lit. So just as an experiment, I'm going to put a larger size log in the Ranger just to show you what it does. In my experience, the Ranger doesn't really like this size wood, but I want to show you guys for your own experience. So using the kindling cracker is very important when using the Ranger, or you want to make sure you get the smaller size sticks when you're picking them up off the forest. So this is one of the smaller campfire size pieces of wood that I have. So I'm going to stick this in the Ranger so you guys can see it. So I really want to get this Yukon started so you guys can really see how well it does. So I'm going to add a little bit more citronella and hopefully get a little bit more flame going. So if you haven't noticed, one thing is as the stoves get smaller in size, they require more maintenance and more frequent adding of wood. So I just wanted to show you the campfire is burning pretty good. It has some really nice coals in it. And again, the wood that I have in the stove is pretty big for what it's supposed to be, which is why it isn't burning as well as it could be. And we have the Ranger next, followed by the Bonfire and the Yukon. So one tip, if you are using charcoal in these stoves, it is handy to add a couple of smaller sticks just to make sure the flame keeps on going.